We're going to continue our message series called Jesus, Great Transformer. I love this. The title of this series, The Great Transformer. If you've seen the Transformer movies, you know, that's kind of what I have in my mind, but we're really talking about like Transformers that take electricity from its raw, scary, deadly power and transforming it into power we can use in our homes to turn on lights and things like that. God in His raw power and in His raw form is deadly. It says in the Old Testament, no one can look at His face and live, right? But Jesus came to earth as a transformer so that we can get close to God and we can experience His presence. That's what we're talking about. If you grew up in the church, you're probably really familiar with this morning's encounter that Jesus had. By this time, Jesus is gaining a lot of popularity. People are coming out to see Him in large numbers, by the thousands. People, if you want to get to see Jesus, you got to kind of make an appointment, you know, to go see Jesus so He can talk with you, because there's just that many people surrounding Him. Every move He made, people were there. Everything He was saying, people were either writing down or they were telling others about it. He definitely was at the height of His popularity. But on this particular day, a wee little man climbed a sycamore tree just to see Jesus as He was passing by. And the cool thing is that this man didn't need an appointment to see Jesus. In fact, Jesus knew that He had an appointment with this man, Zacchaeus. Jesus knew he was there for a reason. And so this is a great story because it shows tremendous transformation that happened in Zacchaeus' life. And so as we work through this encounter, I want us to kind of look at 4 characteristics of transformation that take place, especially when we're trying to get from being selfish people to selfless people. And that's kind of hard in today's society, right? With all this the self-image that we portray with selfies and things like that. So how do we become selfless in this day and age? Well, let's begin in verse 1, Luke chapter 19. And it says this, we'll do 1 and 2 here. Jesus entered Jericho, and He was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He was wealthy. That tells me that Zacchaeus was good at his job, okay? Because back then, being a tax collector was kind of this horrible thing to be doing. Tax collecting was a horrible institution. And if you were good at your job as a tax collector, man, you made a ton of money. You see, Rome's government, Rome was in control at the time, Rome's government needed inside people who could get into the Israelite nation and find out just how much stuff and how much money the people had. And so these tax collectors would arrive in these cities, and the people would show up, and these people would say, here's what I've got. And they would assess all their property, all their money, and the tax collector would say, wow, looks like you've got a lot of stuff. You're going to owe a lot of taxes. And so the people would say, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you not tell the government how much I have? Pretty smart, huh? We kind of do that. Some people do that on their taxes today. I really didn't make this amount. I made this amount. Well, that's kind of what they're doing. Just don't tell the government how much I have. Save me some taxes. And so the tax collectors would be, okay, that sounds fair, but here's the deal. If I save you some money on your taxes, you're going to give me a cut of your savings. So this is how they made their money. They would tell the government, well, they really had this. They didn't really have this much, so we taxed them here, but they would make some money off the top. Then, to make matters worse, the tax collectors, they'd make that deal. The people would save money on their taxes, and the tax collectors would grow wealthy. Well, the tax collectors would, in turn, go back to the Roman government and say, hey, guys, listen, these people are trying to trick you in not claiming everything they own, and so you got to do something about this. So what the government would do is raise their taxes. And so it's just this vicious cycle. We call these kinds of people double-crossers, right? This is the kind of man that Zacchaeus is. He was good at his job. He was wealthy. He's this double-crossing man, and he had money, and he had power, and people looked up to him. Well, at least the Roman government people looked up to him. The other people hated him, but he should have been happy with how his life was going. He was so consumed with self and gratifying his own nature. But despite all the good things that were going on in his life, this man was miserable. He needed to change his life, and he knew it. He was done fulfilling self, and he needed transformation in his life. Okay, so this is Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Verse 3. And so Zacchaeus wanted to see who Jesus was. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but he could not because he was a short man and because of the crowd. So Zacchaeus wants to see who Jesus is. And if you want to find true transformation from Jesus, I hope you'll take notes this morning. There on the back of your bulletins is a sermon outline where you can fill in some blanks. And we'll talk about these 4 characteristics of transformation. And the first step is this. Like Zacchaeus, we've got to get close to Jesus. Write that in your notes. We've got to get close to Jesus. If we want to find true transformation in our lives, if we want to get better and become better followers of Jesus Christ, we've got to get close to Jesus. What's that mean? Well, one of the reasons we get together each week right here in this room is so that when we come in here, we actually leave better than when we came in here. Are you here for that? Like, I just want to improve my life. I want to live a better life out there in the world, and I just want to do things right. People who don't want to change, they don't want to get close to Jesus, right? They kind of stay away. They keep religion at arm's length. They don't want to discuss spiritual things. They don't want to talk about church or even go to church or talk about religious issues, and they stay away from spiritual values and they kind of live their own lives. But have you ever seen those contest rules that say, must be present to win? Don't you hate that? Oh man, I got to go back. Must be present to win. But you know, this is kind of how it is with the church. If you really want to reap the benefits of being a Christian and reap the blessings that come along with the Christian life, guess what? You got to be present, right? Can't do it on your own. Doing it on your own is selfish. But you got to be present to win the Christian life. What's winning look like in the Christian life? You know, we're all racing, we're all trying to get the same place. But what does this look like? Well, when you surround yourself with other believers in worship services, in Bible studies, in discipleship groups, in serving in ministry here in the church and outside the church in our community, when you do these things, you find that you start growing in your relationship with Jesus. Things tend to go a little better, and you feel closer to God, and He begins to transform you. And that's winning in the Christian life, that you become a better person, not only for yourself, but for those around you, and a better person for God. That's winning, and you got to be present to do it, right? I imagine Zacchaeus, he's living the dream, right? He's got the American dream, I think. He's got the big house. He's got the woman of his dreams. He's got the fastest camel in all of Israel. Probably painted red. He's got all this money. He's living this lavish lifestyle. Things are great for Zacchaeus. And so I'm thinking to myself, why would he want to go to see Jesus? He's got everything he needs. Why would he want to go see Jesus? I like to kind of put stories together in the Bible, and I don't know if this is true. I'd like to think this, but remember a while back, Matthew, the tax collector, remember the party that Matthew had at his house? Well, Matthew invites Jesus and his 12 disciples and all these worldly friends. They're all gathered there in his house, right? I'd like to think that maybe Zacchaeus showed up. Here's Matthew, the tax collector. I'm sure he invited Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Hey, come on and hang out with us. Well, it was at this party that Matthew's life was transformed, right? Jesus asked Matthew to be one of his disciples. And I could imagine after this party and after Matthew starts hanging out with Jesus, that Matthew is still in contact with Zacchaeus and saying, hey, Zacchaeus, man, he's really changing my life. It's not about money and wealth. It's really about just living my life for Jesus Christ. And I think Matthew stayed in contact with Zacchaeus, and he told him, if Jesus ever comes around, comes to your town or whatever, you need to go see him. You need to let this guy change your life. That's what I like to think. I think Zacchaeus knew who Jesus was, and he was keeping an eye out for Jesus. And so, because he was in contact with Matthew, he wanted to get close to him. Maybe there is something to this after all. I love that Luke doesn't, he doesn't say that Zacchaeus just wanted to see Jesus, right? It doesn't say he just wanted to go and see what this guy looked like. But he wanted to see who Jesus was. Like, what is this man all about? What are his teachings? What's he going to do? And I wonder how many of our friends and our family and our coworkers, people we hang out with, I wonder how many of them actually need to see who Jesus is. What's that look like? And we have this opportunity, I think, every week and every day when we hang out with them, but we have this opportunity right here every week to invite them into this place so they can experience Jesus. We metaphorically say we can sit at Jesus' feet and learn from him. We have this opportunity to reach out to people who need Jesus and help them to find this loving relationship with Jesus, because I think, like Zacchaeus, our friends and our family and our coworkers, all these people that we hang out with, they are hungry for something. Maybe they don't know, but they're hungry for Jesus Christ. We have this opportunity to reach out to them and invite them. You might have friends in your life who just wonder what goes on inside these four walls, right? And they're just looking for an excuse. All you got to do is invite them. Come on and see what happens inside these four walls. Someone defined evangelism as one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread, right? This is it. This is where you find it. Jesus is the bread of life. You invite them here. And I wonder how many are looking for the opportunity just to come here and see. Well, anyway, James chapter 4 and verse 8. Come near to God and what will happen? Do you believe it? He will come near to us. So it's not something God is doing. It's something that we have to do. If we want to get close to Jesus, then we got to show up. We got to draw near to him. We got to get inside our Bibles. We got to come to worship regularly. We got to get involved with discipleship groups, D groups as I like to call them. We got to get involved in Bible study and prayer and all this stuff. Do you want to feel the presence of Jesus Christ in your life? How do you get there? Draw near to him. Come close to him. Warren Wiersbe writes, Zacchaeus thought he was seeking Jesus, but really Jesus was actually seeking Zacchaeus. Don't you love that? Jesus is seeking us. He wants us to come close. So verse 3 says he wanted to see who Jesus was, and then it says, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. All right, we don't know how short he was, but like Zacchaeus, we've got to persevere despite opposition. Oh, wait a minute, I've heard that before. Yeah, we talked about this last week. Write that in your notes. We've got to persevere despite opposition. We talked about last week with blind Bartimaeus, remember? Blind Bartimaeus was blind, and despite the people holding him back and not telling him to be quiet and don't bother the teacher, he persisted in trying to get to the Messiah, trying to get to Jesus so he could be healed. And he wanted Jesus to have mercy on him. So he persisted all the more. Zacchaeus isn't much different in this story here. Zacchaeus wanted to get close to Jesus, wanted to see Jesus, but he couldn't because he's short. He's got physical limitations. And he could have gone out and he could have just said, you know what, I can't see him. I might as well just go home. It's not worth it. I tried, right? But he persists. He goes the extra mile and he climbs this tree. Now, I think about some of the physical limitations some of you have here in this room this morning. I know some of you struggle with some very serious issues. Maybe some of you work long hours all week long, and you get to Sunday morning, man, all you want to do is sleep in. There's a physical limitation. I need rest, right? Some of you overcome physical limitations like you wake up with pain. There's so much pain, and you have to take all these pills in the morning just so you can get moving. You got physical limitations. Some of you have kids. Parents, you have kids. You got to get ready. 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 kids. You got to get ready. There's physical limitations there. How do I get all these kids out the door in time for church, right? We have elderly people that have physical limitations. They got to use canes and walkers, some wheelchairs, and it's difficult for them to get out. So some of you, like Zacchaeus, I think you do go the extra mile to overcome those physical limitations. So you can get here on Sunday morning, so you can experience Jesus, you can see Him and sit at His feet and learn from Him. And I admire that. You're overcoming, you're persisting despite your limitations. You're overcoming those obstacles. Now, I think Zacchaeus' issues go beyond his physical limitations, okay? You got to remember, Zacchaeus is this despicable, hated man. People don't like him. And so, here, I can imagine. Everybody else, they know who Zacchaeus is, and they're not going to let him see Jesus. I think they're trying to block him. You know what I mean? Like, you're not allowed to see Jesus. You're an evil man. They're keeping him from seeing Jesus. They're trying to keep him away from seeing Jesus. And the question is, here's the question, are you keeping people from seeing Jesus? And maybe not, I don't know. Are there people in your life, here's a question, that you would rather not be around on Sunday mornings? And you're keeping them from seeing Jesus? Are there people in your life that they've watched how you live your life and they say, why would I want to be a Christian? Are there words that you're saying that people hear that are keeping them from seeing Jesus? Are you keeping people from Jesus because of the way you live? That's what they were doing with Zacchaeus. You can't see Jesus. Mitch is going to sing an invitation song today. It's going to be a special, and it's called What If I Stumble by DC Talk. I love DC Talk. They're like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, I went to see them in concert, great people. But they have this song called What If I Stumble? And at the beginning of the song, in the studio version, there's this quote by Brennan Manning, and it goes like this. It's up here. The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, then walk out the door and deny Him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. Are you keeping people from seeing Jesus because of what's coming out of your mouth, because of the attitude you portray, or because of your behavior and lifestyle? It's no different than what these people are trying to do with Zacchaeus. People want to see Jesus, but they can't because you're in the way. I think our goal should be to make it so easy for everyone to come to know Jesus Christ by the way we live our lives and with our attitudes towards certain people and the words that we use. We should make it so easy for people to come to Jesus. Let's read on. Verse 4. So Zacchaeus, he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see Him, since Jesus was coming that way. I love this part because against all cultural norms and rules for adults, this adult Zacchaeus goes the extra mile. He reverts to childlike ways, and he's running through the streets. No adult in their right mind would run through the streets at that time in Israel. All right, so this looks weird. Here's this little adult man running through the streets, and what's he do next? He climbs this fig tree. I love it. He goes the extra mile. Verse 5, when Jesus reached the spot, He looked up and He said to him, Zacchaeus. Now stop there for a second. I love that Jesus uses his name. He calls him by name. I love that Jesus knows his name. You know why? Because it tells me that Jesus knows my name. He knows your name. And He calls it. And we love to be called by name, right? Especially when somebody calls us by name who's in the public eye, like there's somebody of prominent, importance or whatever. We love to be called by name. Here's what I love. Isaiah 49:16 tells us that God has engraved you in the palm of His hand. Isn't that cool? That's like a noteworthy tattoo to have, right? God has tattooed your name in the palm of in the palm of His hand. I love that God knows our name. I just imagine Zacchaeus must have felt just wonderful when Jesus looked up at that tree and said, Zacchaeus. What's He say? Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I got to stay at your house today. This had to shock the crowd, right? We're going to learn that they muttered here in a little bit. But really, Jesus, you want to go to this guy's house? What are you thinking, man? This guy's evil. This guy is greedy. He's selfish. He's a lowlife. Why would you want to go to his house? And I wonder how many of us keep people from Jesus, not just because of our words and our actions and our attitudes towards certain people, but because we judge them. We make these harsh and rash judgments against people, and they go, I don't want to be a part of that. If that's how Christianity is, right? Now, Zacchaeus, he doesn't argue with Jesus, right? He's not like, well, I'm unworthy. You don't need to come to my house. He doesn't say, you know what, Jesus, I just came here to see you and I didn't want to get that close. Please don't come to my house, right? Or he didn't say, Jesus, don't come to my house. There are certain things that I've bought with my stolen money that I just don't want you to see. It, like no divine being should ever see in somebody's house. Okay, he didn't make any excuses. He didn't do anything, but he said, okay, let's go. Now, most of us, let's talk about Zacchaeus for a second. Most of us wouldn't consider ourselves to be very selfish, right? How many of you say, yep, I'm a selfish person? Nobody's going to admit that. Why? Because you're selfish. But I think we can be a little more selfish than we think sometimes, Say there are two pieces of chicken left over. One's this tiny little wing and one's a chicken breast. Which one are you going to take? Who gets to drive the nice car in your family, right? When you go on vacation, do you say to yourself, we're not in church this weekend, and why give our tithe? Do you send your tithe ahead, or do you say, no, we're not going to be in church, we'll just kind of hold it, Or maybe you get a little bit of extra money, and you decide, you know what, I got a little extra money, I'm just going to save it for myself, you not share it with anybody else. I think we can be selfish, right? Can we be selfish? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can be pretty selfish, just like Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus kind of goes to extremes with his selfishness. But man, the whole concept of sin, if you want to just get down to the nitty-gritty, the whole concept of sin is selfishness. Right? Adam and Eve, I want to be like God, so I'm going to eat the fruit. That's where it started. It's all about selfishness. We sin when we stubbornly choose to do what we want instead of what God wants. That's selfish. Are we selfish? Of course we are. Can we change? Can we be transformed? And I think these are the questions that Zacchaeus is pondering as they're walking off to his house. Can I really change? Can I really become this new person that Jesus expects me to be? Verse 6, so he came down. He came down at once and welcomed him gladly. This is probably the toughest part of being transformed for Jesus Christ. Because Zacchaeus allows Jesus to come into his private life. Write that in your notes. He allows Jesus to come into his private life. I would say probably as Americans, the most private part of our lives is where? At home, our home is like our castle. Anybody tries to storm it, we get rid of them, right? Our home. Some of us have a hard time letting some of our closest friends and relatives come into our homes, don't we? What do? We want to be notified first. If you're coming to my house, please call me first. Why? So we can clean up. We can put those not so nice things away somewhere. They can be hidden, right? We lock certain doors. That's what we do. We don't want people to see our private lives sometimes. And so I wonder, what if Jesus showed up at your house this afternoon? If you're like I am, I'm hiding, I'm ducking, pretending nobody's home, right? I'd imagine you probably let Jesus in. You let Jesus into your house. You'd be like, all right, come on in. you know. But maybe you wouldn't open certain doors. Can't go in that closet. There's greed and selfishness in there. Can't go in there, right? You'd say, oh, Jesus, don't go downstairs. Stay out of the basement. It's just an old, damp, dirty basement. And besides, I don't want you to see those things that those temptations that got a hold on me. I don't want you to see all that lust. I don't want you to get close to my liquor cabinet. Just stay out of the basement, Jesus. And if we're going to hang out in the family room, Jesus, I control the remote. I control the remote, Jesus, because I don't want you to see what's on my DVR. Oh, man, you see the deal. Oh, that's not good. But I'll tell you what, Jesus, to be honest, when I come home from work, it's been a long, hard day, man. All I want to do is just sit down in front of the TV. These shows really, they help me unwind. I wonder, if Jesus came to your house this afternoon, would you care what he saw? Would you care? I love that Zacchaeus doesn't care. Here it is. Here it is. Zacchaeus, I think, reached a point in his life where he was ready to change. He was ready to be transformed. He's ready to get out of this rut of a miserable life. And I believe that Jesus, he wants to come into your life. He wants to come into your house, whatever that looks like, whatever you're trying to hide. He wants to transform you and help you become a better person. He wants you to live a better life that's centered around him. And sometimes the best way to grow in your relationship with him is to kind of let go of those things that are holding you back, right? A couple weeks ago, we learned about the rich young ruler. Remember the rich young ruler? Jesus says, you got to let it go, man. Sell everything you have, give it to the poor. And the rich young ruler, what did he do? He walked away. How did he feel when he walked away? He was what? Sad. He was sad. I'd like to think that Zacchaeus had heard about that encounter, And so Zacchaeus decided, I don't want to live that kind of existence. I don't want to be sad the rest of my life. I don't want to be miserable anymore. And so he decided, I want to get close to Jesus. And I think he realized there's definitely a cost involved. He wanted this rich man to sell everything he had and give it to the poor. So there's a cost involved. So he would be moved from selfishness to selflessness, and his life would never be the same again. Look at how the crowd reacts to this whole thing in verse 7. All the people saw this, and they began to mutter. This is the only place in the Bible where everyone present mutters. All right? And they say, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. Ooh, there's that judgment again. Right? People trying to keep people from seeing Jesus. Look at how Zacchaeus responds in verse 8. Zacchaeus stood up and he said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Now, this is interesting, 4 times the amount, because in the Old Testament law, if you confess to stealing something, you had to pay back what you stole plus 20%. So if you stole $100 and you confess to it, how much do you owe? $120. Zacchaeus says, nope, I'm going to take it even further. I'm going to give you $400. And the line starts to form. Me first, Zacchaeus, I got a bone to pick with you, right? 4 times the amount. I love this because Zacchaeus shows evidence of his transformation. And we've got to do the same thing. Have we really been transformed? Well, there's going to be evidence. Write that in your notes. There's got to be evidence of our transformation. And really, when true transformation takes place, we begin to come to this place of repentance and restitution. You might write those 2 words underneath there. Repentance and restitution. That's going to be the evidence that you're being transformed by Jesus Christ. You're going to start turning your life around and you're going to start making amends with those people that maybe you've wronged. It's easy to say sorry to your spouse, right? But it's another thing to actually change and do the right thing. It's easy to apologize and say, I need to be home more with my kids, but it's another thing to actually alter your schedule and make it happen. Okay, so it's easy to say sorry, but it's harder to repent. I had to tell this story. The Olympic Winter Games are coming up, right? How many of you are excited about that? I mean, I think it's cool. I like to watch the skiing and stuff like that. So they're coming up. I had to tell this story about this man named Hal Priest. You may not know who Hal Priest is, but he won a bronze medal in the 1920 Olympic Games in Belgium. Anybody there? 1920. He won a bronze medal. Now, it just so happened that was the same year that they released the Olympic flag. They unveiled the Olympic flag with the 5 rings on it. First time, all right? This is a pretty cool story. So Hal Priest, he decides, I'm going to take one of those flags, and he does. He steals one of those flags, he brings it home to the United States of America, and he keeps it hidden for 80 years. No one knows about it. 80 years. Finally, in the year 2000, at the age of 103, still alive, he flies to Sydney, Australia, where the Olympic Games are that year. He goes to the Olympic Committee and he returns that flag that he stole in Belgium in 1920. Why? To clear his conscience at 103 years old. That's how much it weighed on him. This is what's cool about being transformed by Jesus. You want to make restitution. You want to make things right. It helps to prove that we really just want to come out of our past transgressions, out of the things that we've done wrong, and make it right. You can't undo the things you've already done, right? What's done is done. It's happened. But you can try to make restitution. And that's what Zacchaeus tries to do, to make restitution. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think this is the last generous gift Zacchaeus ever gave? You know, like, is this a one-time shot because Jesus is in his home? Now think about this. Where are you the most behaved? Probably in church, right? Got to be on our best behavior here. Zacchaeus, he's got Jesus in his house. He's on his most behaved. He's on his best behavior because Jesus is there. Do you think that was it for Zacchaeus? I think it's not. I think he was transformed, and this became a lifestyle change forever. I think Zacchaeus continued to be generous. I think he stopped cheating people. I think that's why God made certain that this story ended up in the Bible, right? It's an example for us. And I also think that because of the next 2 verses. What do those say? Verses 9 and 10. It says this, Zacchaeus stood up and he said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." He came to seek and to save what was lost. Zacchaeus was changed in a single moment, but it was not a single life event. It was a commitment to an entire future and where he's going to be. Just like baptism, when you're baptized, it's not the finish line. This is the starting blocks. It's where it all begins. And so you're saying to Jesus, "Lord, I want to continue to be used by you. I want to be transformed daily by you. I want to turn everything over to you. I want to stop being selfish, and I want you at the center of my life so that you can transform me day in and day out." And so you're saying, I've met Jesus, and I'm never going to be the same again, right? I think Jesus does 2 things for Zacchaeus that day. He forgives his sins, and he restores his dignity. He forgives his sins and he restores his dignity. He makes him somebody that day. Remember 2 Corinthians 5:17? I told you this should be your anthem this year. This should be your anthem verse this year, 2018, because it defines who you are. 2 Corinthians 5:17, when someone becomes a Christian, he becomes a brand new person inside. He's not the same anymore, and new life has begun. I love that verse. You become somebody new. You're no longer selfish, you're selfless. Zacchaeus was a wee little man who became a giant that day, and Jesus can do the same for you. You got to put your trust in him. You got to believe in him so he can transform you and change you. He can take a life that's selfish, that's bent on living for number one, and He can change it to where your focus is on Him instead. Very easily.